Good evening, I'm Richard Nixon, and here are tonight's news stories brought to you by the pessimism and grumpiness of yours truly. We start here in Sudan, where fighting erupted across the capital last weekend. This comes after months of rising tensions between factions of the armed forces, which have dashed hopes that military leaders would cede power to a democratic government led by civilians. It seems like the people of Sudan can't catch a break. Just 4 years ago, they saw a jubilant popular uprising that toppled the ruler of 3 decades, President Omar Hassan al-Bashir. But hopes for democracy and an end to the country's international isolation faltered 18 months ago, when the 2 most powerful generals united to seize power in a coup. And now those very men are fighting each other, worsening an already dire humanitarian crisis. As a sign of how bad things might still get, the Pentagon has moved troops to Djibouti to prepare for an evacuation of U.S. Embassy staff from Sudan. It's a mess, folks. American troops, Middle Eastern country. I have never heard these words together in a sentence. I'm sure they'll do a bang-up job. Speaking of war, let's talk about the one in Europe. The U.S. is sending Ukraine a new weapons package valued at $325 million. Brilliant. Between the Pentagon and the Ukrainians, that will cover the cost of the killing for a few more months. Meanwhile, Hungary and Poland banned Ukrainian grain imports after a glut of Ukrainian exports cut into their farmers' profits. And who gets caught in the middle? The people living along the front line in eastern Ukraine, who increasingly blame attacks on their towns, not on the Russian forces that have bombarded their region for the past 8 months, but on the Ukrainian army. Ukrainian soldiers call them waiters because they refuse to be evacuated while they're awaiting a Russian takeover. It's a sad state of affairs. Turning to China, President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva of Brazil met with President Xi Jinping of China on Friday as Lula sought to rebuild his country's ties with Beijing. The two spoke about the war in Ukraine and the need to strengthen ties amid complex geopolitical realignments. They craftily avoided the words invasion or war and offered few specifics. Both have refused to take a side and have preserved business ties with Russia. Brazil has criticized Russia in carefully worded statements, but it also relies on Russia for fertilizer. Lula has suggested that Ukraine's president and NATO share some blame, and he has resisted calls to send weapons to Ukraine. Lula called for China's territorial integrity to be respected with regard to Taiwan, a similar stance to that taken by President Emmanuel Macron of France after meeting with Xi in China this month. And let's not forget China's defense minister, Li Shangfu, who met with President Vladimir Putin in Russia this week. The French, the Brazilians, the Chinese, all meeting with Putin. It's like they think they can have their own foreign policy. Outrageous! In nuclear news, U.S. officials are obsessively complaining that China is building up its nuclear arsenal. Now the U.S. is facing questions about how to manage a 3-way nuclear rivalry, which upends much of the deterrence strategy that has avoided a nuclear war. And let's not forget North Korea, which said it had tested a solid-fuel intercontinental ballistic missile for the first time, which would be a significant step for its missile program. In response, the U.S., South Korea, and Japan conducted joint naval exercises. Big whoop! Moving across Asia, India will soon become the world's most populous country, supplanting China for the first time in centuries, according to data from the United Nations. And in Europe, Germany closed its final nuclear power plants. The country is an outlier, as other European countries are looking to expand their use of nuclear energy. And now for some lighter news. No, I didn't think so. In cowboy country, a shoe salesman pleaded guilty to stealing the thumb of a 2,000-year-old Chinese terracotta warrior. Can you believe it? Even the statues aren't safe from thievery these days. The U.S. Supreme Court has decided to continue to allow widespread access to a crucial abortion pill through Friday evening, giving the court more time to consider the case. Frankly, I don't care what they decide. It's not like they listen to the people anyways. It's just another way for them to drag their feet and waste time while people suffer. The sane and stable folks at Fox News had to hand over $87.5 million in a defamation settlement to a company that makes voting machines. Well, it's about time they were held accountable for their lies and misinformation. Lastly, SpaceX's Starship rocket successfully took off this week and then exploded 3 minutes later. Big whoop. And to top it off, this was the largest rocket ever made and launched. Now it's just the world's most expensive metal confetti collection. Well, that's all from me, folks. Please like, share, and hit the notifications bell. You are watching the Ministry of Propaganda